Joining us now, the mayor of Tallahassee, Florida, Andrew Gillum. He's the Democratic nominee for governor in the state of Florida. Mr. Mayor, good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
It's good to be here. Thank you all so much for having me.
First and most important question. You're the mayor of Tallahassee. What's going on with the Seminoles right
Come on, man. Don't put me in that position. Look, there's some growing to take place. But being born in Miami, finishing high school in Gainesville, Florida, and now being mayor of Tallahassee, I got statewide teams,
I was going to say, you've covered all your bases.
Exactly.
So let's talk about what's happening on the ground in the state of Florida. You shocked a lot of people across the country. You became a prominent figure in the Democratic Party immediately when you won the primary there. You've been ahead in every poll since that day. One had you up by 9 points. The most recent one shows some tightening at about a 1-point lead for you, a margin of error race really in that state against the Republican Ron DeSantis. What's the number one issue people ask you about when you go out shaking hands every day?
Yeah, and you know what? We've been all over the state of Florida. I was just in Palaca. Joe would know this area well. Pretty red area of our state. And consistently, we're hearing people concerned about health care. We're a state that did not expand Medicaid for over 800,000 of the most medically needy people in our state. We could have pulled down $6 billion from the federal government last year alone had we expanded Medicaid, expanded access, not just helping those without insurance, but also bringing further cost control for those of us with insurance. My opponent, Mr. DeSantis, has said that people get access to health care because they can always go to an emergency room. He's voted in Congress repeatedly, obviously, to repeal the Affordable Care Act and is in favor of allowing insurance companies to discriminate against people based off of pre-existing conditions. For folks who have cancer, of which my grandmother just passed from cervical cancer just earlier this week. Folks with, thank you for that. But the truth is that many of the people in our state live with pre-existing conditions every single day. And the fact that you would have a sitting, a member of Congress, now former member, talk about the fact that insurance companies should be able to discriminate again, to me, is out of step with the lived experiences of Floridians, and only further causes people to be stressed out over an illness.
You know, as you talk about taking care of people in medicine, you've proposed Medicare for all. Obviously, as a governor, you wouldn't have a say in that. That's a federal proposition. By some estimates, that would cost $30 trillion over a decade. The estimates say if you doubled federal income tax and doubled federal corporate tax, you still wouldn't cover that cost. What do you say to the people of Florida if there were Medicare for all, that their taxes would go through the roof?
Yeah, well, first off, my endorsement of Medicare for all is at the federal level. And there have been conservative reports that have shown that the system over a course of a decade could save as much as $3 trillion if we went that direction, while also covering more people. But as my job as the governor of the state of Florida, it will be to close the uninsurance gap that exists in our state. Right now, 1 in 5 people don't have access to health care. And when I talk about it, I want folks to understand it is not some abstract thought from me. As a kid growing up in Miami, I remember having to wait for the free dental clinic to come through the neighborhood in order to have our teeth cleaned. There are people who are literally terrified of getting sick because if they get sick, they can't go to work. If they don't go to work, they can't earn a wage. If they don't bring home a paycheck, they can't pay their bills. And so we've got to reduce that level of anxiety, but also pressure economically on the system. Healthcare is the most ballooning part of the state of Florida's budget. If we don't fix it, we're going to have serious problems.
Joe.
So, Mr. Mayor, how do you make that argument to people from my part of the state? Northern Florida, from Pensacola through Panama City over to Tallahassee and Jacksonville. There are a lot of people that voted for Donald Trump in 2016 because they believed they were going to get better health care. They were going to get cheaper health care. I mean, he promised it.
Yeah.
How do you explain to those voters who may reflexively want to support Donald Trump that actually what's happened over the past 2 years actually makes their prospects for having good, affordable health care for themselves and their children even more of a distant reality?
Yeah, and Joe, you know this well because this impacts our part of the state. I'm in Tallahassee, campaigned heavily over in your part of the state during the primary and won your home county in the primary election. And the truth is that those are the areas that are disproportionately impacted by the cost of health care and the absence of having that health care. What we've got to do and what I've got to do as the Democratic nominee for governor and what I would have hoped we'd have done in the past is that we got to go to those communities and talk to folks. We got to let them know that we hear them, that we see them, that we have a plan to do something about what their lived experiences are. Nobody in our state ought to be terrified of getting sick, fear for being one illness away from bankruptcy. And in that part of the state, as well as all across the state of Florida, people literally are terrified about not having access to health care. What I'm going to do and what we have done is we've traveled to parts of the state that have not seen a Democratic nominee before. We were in Palatka. We were in Palm Coast the other day. Went down to Sarasota just yesterday. And again, people are coming out. I think people really underestimate the energy that is happening on the ground. People are frustrated, angry, and they want an elected official to do something about it. And that's what we're going to do.
So, Mayor Gillum, what's the nature of your ground game? A lot of this depends upon getting those unlikely voters out, particularly African American voters and young folk. So what are you doing specifically to appeal to those folk that aren't showing up in the polls, but who could change the very landscape of the
Listen, you're speaking my language. I believe that every race is won and lost on the ground. That's what we did in the primary. We had 150,000 voters turn out in the primary who either one had never voted before or had not voted in the previous 3 elections. It's my intention to double that number. That's why we're going to remote places. For too long, the race for governor has been treated as if it's the Electoral College. You don't win one county and lose another, pick up one and lose another. The one who wins is the one who gets one more vote. And that one more vote may come from anywhere throughout the length and the breadth of our state. And so we're putting as many resources as we can muster into a ground game, motivating, moving our voters. We can't win if we don't go there. So I'm prepared to go there, ask for their vote, and then put in place a serious operation to turn more voters out.
Mayor Andrew Gillum, thank you very much for being on the show. Good luck.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.